In the late 13th century, Scotland stood on the edge of collapse. When King Alexander III died suddenly in 1286, he left behind no clear adult heir, only a fragile line of succession held together by hope and diplomacy. That hope shattered with the death of his granddaughter, Margaret, the Maid of Norway. Overnight, Scotland became a kingdom without a king, and that vacuum of power invited disaster. Unable to agree on who should rule, the Scottish nobility made a fatal mistake. They invited Edward I of England to arbitrate the succession. Edward, later known as Longshanks, did not come as a neutral judge. He came as a conqueror. Exploiting Scotland's weakness, he installed John Balliol as king in name only, reducing Scotland to a vassal state under English control. What followed was rebellion. Across the lowlands and highlands, resistance ignited. Men who had never dreamed of war took up arms against one of the most powerful monarchs in Europe. Out of this chaos rose two unlikely leaders, William Wallace and Andrew Moray, who shattered English confidence at Stirling Bridge in 1297. There, a smaller Scottish force destroyed an English army by outthinking it, proving that Edward's grip on Scotland was not unbreakable. But the English response was brutal. At Falkirk in 1298, Edward I returned at the head of one of the largest armies Britain had ever seen. Heavy cavalry, professional archers, and disciplined infantry. Wallace's forces were crushed. Years later, Wallace himself was captured and executed in London in a public display meant to terrify Scotland into submission. Instead, it hardened Scottish resolve. From the ashes of defeat emerged a man history would never forget, Robert the Bruce. In 1306, Bruce murdered his rival John Comyn in a church and crowned himself King of Scots. The act branded him a traitor, an outlaw, and an excommunicate. Hunted across his own land, Bruce was forced into exile, hiding in the wilderness while English forces burned Scotland to the ground. But Bruce adapted. Rather than meeting England's massive armies head-on, he waged a war of survival, scorched earth, ambushes, and relentless guerrilla tactics. Castles were destroyed so they could not be used against him. Supply lines were cut. Slowly, relentlessly, Scotland was reclaimed. What began as a succession dispute had now become something far greater. It was no longer just about a crown. It was about whether a nation could survive against overwhelming power, and soon that struggle would culminate in a single battle that would decide the fate of Scotland forever. By the summer of 1314, the war for Scotland had narrowed to a single point on the map. Only Stirling Castle, the key to controlling the entire country, remained in English hands. It stood under siege by Edward Bruce, brother of the Scottish king. Desperate and isolated, the English garrison struck a deal. If no relief army arrived by midsummer, the castle would surrender. That agreement forced England's hand. Edward II could not afford to lose Stirling. To do so would mean the effective collapse of English authority in Scotland. And so he marched north at the head of one of the largest armies ever assembled by an English king, around 15,000 men. Armored knights, longbowmen, and professional infantry advanced in columns that stretched for miles. Waiting for them was Robert the Bruce, with barely 6,000 soldiers. But Bruce did not choose Bannockburn by chance. The land itself was his greatest weapon. Narrow roads, marshy ground, a twisting stream that choked movement and broke formations. Here, England's devastating heavy cavalry, the terror of medieval Europe, would be useless. Bruce anchored his army behind natural obstacles and prepared his men in shiltrons, tight, bristling circles of spears designed to stop a cavalry charge dead in its tracks. On the evening of June 22nd, the two armies camped on opposite sides of the burn. Across the field stood Edward II, commanding power, wealth, and numbers, but lacking the iron will of his father, Edward Longshanks. On the other side stood Bruce, scarred by exile and defeat, hardened by years of survival warfare. To his men, he was no distant monarch. He fought beside them, slept among them, bled with them, and then history held its breath. As Bruce rode along the Scottish lines on a small horse, inspecting his troops, an English knight spotted him. Sir Henry de Bohun, nephew of the Earl of Hereford, lowered his lance and charged, alone, straight toward the Scottish king. It was meant to be a moment of humiliation, a quick kill, a shattered rebellion. Bruce waited until the last second. Then, with a single swing of his axe, he split de Bohun's skull in two. The knight fell dead at Bruce's feet. The axe shaft shattered from the force of the blow, and silence swept across the field. For the Scots, it was electric. Their king had faced England's chivalry alone and destroyed it. For the English, it was a warning. On the very eve of battle, their confidence cracked. That night, as fires burned along the banks of the Bannockburn, one truth became clear. England had brought numbers. Scotland had brought resolve. And by morning, the fate of a nation would be decided. The first clash at Bannockburn was not a grand assault. It was a test of discipline against arrogance, a test of preparation against assumption. The English knights rode forward expecting the familiar outcome. For generations, armored cavalry had been the ultimate weapon of medieval warfare. Against poorly trained infantry, a charge meant instant collapse. But this time, it didn't. As the knights thundered ahead, they slammed directly into Bruce's shiltrons, dense, immovable walls of spears bristling like iron hedgehogs. Horses reared. Men were thrown. Knights were skewered before they could even swing a sword. What was supposed to be a decisive blow turned into a slaughter. Frustrated, English commanders attempted to force a crossing of the Bannockburn, hoping to outflank the Scots and regain momentum. Instead, the terrain betrayed them. The ground gave way. Armor dragged men under. Some drowned. Others were cut down helplessly in the mud. The Scots fought as one, disciplined, coordinated, relentless. Across the field, Edward II hesitated. He issued orders too late, adjusted too slowly, watched as his numerical advantage dissolved against terrain he did not understand. By nightfall, the English army, larger, richer, and supposedly unstoppable, had gained nothing. The Scots, meanwhile, withdrew in order. They did not celebrate wildly. They understood the truth. They had not won the battle, but they had broken the illusion. That night, fires burned low in the English camp. Confidence gave way to doubt, and across the burn, Bruce's men slept knowing something had changed. Before dawn, Robert the Bruce gathered his army. 6,000 men, farmers, nobles, veterans, survivors of years of war, knelt together in silent prayer. Not for mercy, not for surrender, but for strength. From the English lines, the sight was misread. Edward II believed the Scots were begging for their lives. Certain of victory, he ordered a full assault. What followed was not what England expected. Instead of standing still, Bruce did the unthinkable. He ordered the shiltrons to advance. Solid walls of spears surged forward, pressing directly into the English ranks. Knights found themselves trapped, unable to maneuver, crushed against one another as the Scots drove relentlessly ahead. The battlefield collapsed into chaos. English longbowmen, normally battle-deciding weapons, were rendered useless. The cramped terrain offered no clear lines of fire. Cavalry couldn't charge, infantry couldn't form ranks. Every advantage England brought to the field was neutralized. Panic spread. Then came the moment that shattered everything. From the hills behind the Scottish lines, camp followers, unarmed servants and laborers, poured into view. To the exhausted English soldiers, they looked like fresh reinforcements. The illusion was enough. The English army broke. Men threw down weapons. Knights fled. What began as a retreat turned into a rout. Thousands were cut down as they ran. Others drowned, trying to escape through the burn that had already betrayed them once before. Edward II fled the field, barely escaping capture. He rode for Stirling Castle, only to be turned away by its own governor, bound by the surrender agreement. Humiliated and defeated, the English king fled south, abandoning his army and his claim to Scotland. By the end of June 24, 1314, one truth was undeniable. A smaller army had destroyed one of the largest forces England had ever sent north. Bannockburn was not just a battle. It was the moment Scotland proved it could not be conquered. The scale of England's defeat at Bannockburn was nothing short of catastrophic. Thousands of English soldiers lay dead across the fields and marshes. Nobles and knights, once symbols of English dominance, were captured in droves. Their ransoms poured wealth into Scotland, but gold was not the true prize won that day. What Bannockburn destroyed was English certainty. Robert the Bruce emerged not as a rebel king, but as a legitimate monarch, one who had defeated one of the largest armies England had ever assembled and lived to claim the field. Scotland's independence, though still contested on parchment, was now undeniable on the battlefield. For Edward II, the consequences were devastating. Already viewed as weak, Bannockburn cemented his reputation as a failed commander. The loss shattered confidence in his rule and accelerated the political turmoil that would eventually lead to his overthrow and death. Bannockburn was not just a military defeat. It was the beginning of the end. Beyond Britain, the message traveled fast. France, the papacy, and the courts of Europe no longer saw Scotland as a rebellious province. They saw a nation that had proven itself through blood and steel. That recognition culminated in 1320 with the Declaration of Arbroath, a bold assertion of sovereignty sent directly to the Pope. Its message was defiant and unforgettable. So long as 100 of us remain alive, we will never submit. Bannockburn did more than change borders. It rewrote the rules of war. For centuries, heavy cavalry had dominated medieval battlefields. Bannockburn shattered that assumption. It proved that disciplined infantry, properly led and positioned, could destroy elite knights. The shiltron, once a desperate defensive formation, became a symbol of organized popular power and influenced military thinking across Europe. But Bannockburn's greatest legacy was not tactical, it was cultural. Robert the Bruce became more than a king. He became a symbol of defiance, endurance, and national unity. His stand at Bannockburn passed into legend, carried through generations of folklore and poetry. Centuries later, Robert Burns would echo Bruce's voice in Scots High, transforming medieval memory into a timeless anthem of resistance. The fields of Bannockburn became sacred ground, a place where freedom was not granted, but taken, where unity overcame fear, where a smaller force proved that destiny is not decided by numbers, but by will. And in every Scottish struggle that followed, political, cultural, or military, the name Bannockburn endured as a rallying cry, a reminder that even against overwhelming odds, a determined people can shape their own fate.